Hey everybody, wanted to let you know that my new book, Hometown Titan, Build a Local Business That Dominates Your Market, is now available on Amazon and has already hit the bestseller lists. We're going to be coming out with Audible soon and hoping to get it into some bookstores, but it would mean the world to me if you went out and got your copy here today, because in this book, I tell never before told stories on my 12 plus year journey in the moving industry. So go get your copy today. Hometown Titan, Build a Local Business That Dominates Your Market, and tighten up.
Google knows where all that stuff is. So if you try and register your business operating out of one of those locations, it's going to immediately get flagged.
Remember that every single search someone does results in a search results page. Only 29% of search results pages have a map pack in it.
When movers ask me which CRM to use, it's a no-brainer. I've used Smart Moving the last 4 years and I recommend it to everyone. Once I got my hands on Smart Moving, there was no going back. It was like using an iPhone for the first time. Clean and simple, yet powerful enough to be the centerpiece of our entire business. We're firing off sales follow-ups. We've got automated email campaigns going out. We're dispatching crews out of multiple locations. I run reports and look at KPIs daily. Smart Moving is really tailored to operating a moving company at the highest level without the bugs and glitches I've seen with other softwares. If you want to grow, Smart Moving is the software for you. It even scales as we open new franchise locations. This keeps everything centralized so our teams can field leads, book moves, and operate just as efficiently from anywhere. Check them out and use my link at smartmoving.com/Wade. That's smartmoving.com/Wade to get 1 month free. Welcome everybody back to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. I'm your host, Wade Sweikel, and today we've got a treat for you. This is going to be a topic that I am very passionate about, very curious about, and something that has evolved a lot since we first got into business. And that is marketing on Google and showing up in local search results at the top of the feed organically without having to pay per click like a lot of moving companies do. Basically what you need to do in order to stand out from your competition on the biggest search platform in the world, and that is Google. And today's guests I have joining me today are Bryan Bloom with Mover Search Marketing, who we've been working with for I think 6 or 7 years now, and a special guest that now works alongside Mover Search Marketing, Brad Wetherall, who is actually the head for 11 years of Google Maps and Search. Thank you, Bryan and Brad, for joining me on the podcast today. And I've got a ton of questions, and I'm really excited to jump into this and hear from the experts on how we can dominate the markets that we serve, just like the subtitle in my book, Hometown Titan, back there. So how y'all doing today?
Great. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Wade. It's great to meet you, mate.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you guys are ready to talk because I've got questions. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Brad, if you don't mind, I mean, I've had Bryan on a few times before. A lot of people in the moving industry know that he is the expert, the authority in SEO for moving companies. But tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and your history with Google and what that journey over the course of 11 years looked like. This show is powered by HeyLou's virtual assistant team. They've revolutionized how we run our business and can handle anything from inbox management to social media, research, and yes, even production of this podcast. Want to reclaim more than 20 hours a week in your business so that you can focus on the things that really move the needle? Use our link in the description to get started with your own dedicated VA with HeyLou. And thanks to HeyLou for powering the Grow Your Moving Company podcast.
Yeah, no worries. Well, thanks again for having me. So a little bit about myself. So I worked for Google for over a decade. I started at Google in 2013. I was running the support and operations team for a variety of different products. The first product that I worked on at Google was Google Wallet in the payment space, back before Google Wallet was a thing, and quickly took on responsibility for Maps. So that was specifically the Google Business Profile, or at the time it was referred to Google My Business. And that was like my longest tenure. So I was the director of operations for the Google Business Profile within the Maps organization for over a decade. Towards the end of my career at Google, I took on responsibility for the Google Merchant Center, which is the within the shopping suite of Google products. And I also managed the Google Domains product, which was the domains as a registrar up until the point that it was sold over to Squarespace. So my primary responsibility, though, and my longest tenure was in the search and map space. Google Business Profile was my product, and got lots of stories and advice to be able to give. I left Google last year and started my own consulting business. Been doing a bunch of speaking engagements around the country, which is actually where I met Bryan, and doing some advising and consulting along the way. So happy to be on your podcast and to answer whatever questions you might have.
Wow. So we actually have Google on the podcast, and, there's a lot of companies out there that, they claim to be a Google partner or a Google expert or whatever the case may be. But this is like lifting the curtain back and actually getting somebody that knows what's going on under the hood over there. So let's talk a little bit about, what your findings were during that entire experience when you were heading up, especially Maps, because I know Maps are huge for us. Like we get, tens and tens of thousands of dollars in business each month across each location that we have. And we've been working with Bryan and built strength into the website overall. And it's helping when we open new locations start to rank. And that's really what people look at when they're searching for movers, or any home service really, is they'll see the map. It populates first thing right below the ads. And a lot of people, they just scroll right past the ads. I know I usually scroll right past the ads, and I go to look at the map when I'm trying to find something. But let's kind of get into, how what you've learned that might potentially help moving companies.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, right? Because I think, you're exactly right. A lot of people don't fully understand what the Google Business Profile is. And I try to explain that, like the map pack that shows up, and I try and explain the structure of the search engine results page, or the SERP as we call it internally. And the idea is like you got, when you first do a search, you've got ads, then you've got, if it's a local intent query, right? So someone's looking for something in their general vicinity, then it triggers the local pack, right? Which has, 3 listings, sometimes 4 if there's an ad in there. But like that's your Google Business Profile. That's your opportunity for you as a business owner to tell Google exactly what you want them to know about your business and to how to represent that on the map. Below that is usually more ads, and then below that is your organic search results. And so like for local queries that have local intent, it's incredibly important to optimize your presence in that 3-pack in the local SEO space. Now, I'm not saying that organic search is not important. It absolutely is. For queries that have more informational intent, the local pack isn't shown, and the organic results get kind of like bumped up the page. But like, for those businesses that are really looking to capture business in their market, it's incredibly important. And, my experiences with GBP over the years, the product has evolved dramatically, and I started working on the product in 2013. The name of the product is Google kind of had a bit of an identity crisis, still does in many cases, where they keep changing the name of things. So you may know it by something else, like Google Places, Google My Business, ultimately Google Business Profile. But the evolution of the product has been kind of fascinating to track, where, early days, Google had this philosophy of building a one-size-fits-all business product, right? Like for businesses. And then, a couple of years into that, they realized that it doesn't really work that way, and that there's different, the businesses are different and they need different things. And so, if you're a restaurant, you really want to be really image heavy and image rich profile that you look at the food, you look at the interior of the restaurant. But if you're like a plumber, right, you don't want too many photos on your listing because there's not really any glamorous stuff to show. What's more important in service-based businesses is the ability to talk to someone, to connect to someone. So that's where a lot of the messaging features came in. And it's like, okay, how do we make sure that we're driving phone calls, driving website visits, or even asking questions, right? Like in getting a quote, and so a lot of the features kind of changed based on the industry, because Google is learning that like the consumer intent, what consumers are looking for, differs depending on the industry that you're looking at. And so there's been a really interesting evolution of the product. So I'll pause there because I could go off on 100 different directions, but would love to get your guidance as to like what you'd like to learn more about.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of myths around how to get into those map packs. I've seen companies that just go, rent a mailbox somewhere, or they use their house as an address, whether they have a moving company and they're just trying to get on the other side of town or into another suburb or a city. Or maybe they go rent a co-work space, or maybe they rent a whole separate office somewhere across town that they may or may not do business out of. So, I see a lot of that. I mean, tell me from your experience, like, what are some of the myths on showing up in that map, and what are some of the pros and cons of doing some of those things that I just mentioned?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very relevant question. I actually get asked that a lot. Sorry, Brian, you were going to say?
No, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, mate. The biggest issues that we've been fighting for the last 10 years, last decade on GBP is verification issues and suspension issues, and reviews. They're kind of like the top three issues. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each one because it relates directly to what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. So like the things that you mentioned about attempting to game the system, essentially, right? By putting multiple listings in an area to canvas the map, right? So that you show up more frequently. Those are things that Google is actively fighting, right? They don't want that. That's against policy. And, in the early days, the philosophy was to make the barrier to entry very difficult, meaning make verification, like verifying that you own and operate out of that location, very difficult. And the whole verification process is designed to really only verify two things. One is to verify existence. Does the business actually exist? And does it exist in the location that you say it exists, right? So like that's like, does it physically exist in the world? And then the second thing that we're looking to verify is, are you affiliated with that company? So affiliation. So that is where, yes, we may know that there's a McDonald's on the corner of A and B Street, but do you have the authority to go mess with that listing? Like what gives you the authority? So not only do we have to prove existence, we have to prove the authority that you have and the connection that you have to the business. And so the early days of the product was like making that really difficult. And we used to do things like postcard-based verification, which was actually a really good way of verifying both of those things, right? Because one, if we can send you a postcard and that location can receive mail, then we're confirming its existence, right? But then secondly, if we have a code written on that postcard and then, Wade is the guy that goes into the interface and types in that code, now I've just proved affiliation. So I can prove both things. But postcard verification sucked. And it was really, really difficult. It was dependent on the mail system, which isn't always reliable. People would get impatient and they would request a new postcard, and then it would invalidate the first postcard. And so it's just a nightmare. So what has happened since then is that, almost in the 10 years that I've been working on this product, when they first told me, when I started working on this product and they said, we do this thing called postcard verification, I thought they were like joking. I thought that was like, I'm like, we're Google. What do you mean? We send it, we put a stamp on a piece of paper and we like, that's insane. But when they explained it to me, it made sense. And so over that 10 years, over that decade of experience, there was a big interest in trying to find an alternate method of verification. And so what they ended up deciding to do is they created this new system. Internally, we refer to it as the evolution of trust. And the idea is that we're going to lower the barrier to entry, meaning it's going to be easier for you to claim and create a listing on the map. But the problem is we're going to watch everything that you do. And if you do something that's suspicious, we're going to suspend you, right? Or we're going to have you jump through verification hoops to make sure that you are authorized to make those changes. And so this is where what you were talking about earlier, Wade, in terms of should we be creating listings in these other locations? Should we just go to get a PO box or, like a virtual office space or something like that, just so we can get other listings? Google is getting really good at detecting those cases, right? They typically know where all the virtual office buildings are, right? The Reguses of the world, the WeWorks, right? Like Google knows where all that stuff is. So if you try and register your business operating out of one of those locations, it's going to immediately get flagged. And so they may allow you to verify to claim the listing, but it'll either jump straight through into a suspension or a verification, where then the burden of proof is now on you, where you have to prove that is a location that you legitimately work at. So I guess that's a long way of saying I don't think the risk is worth it. I think, sometimes you can get away with it, but Google is going to catch you. And when it does, getting suspended actually hurts the trust that you have in the product all again. So there's some residual implications to that as you want to kind of try and fix that and go forward. So I know that there are some businesses out there that are doing it. Some industries are worse than others, but I would advise against that to all of my clients, because I think you can get a tremendous amount of value out of new client base and optimizing your legitimate business listing without needing to kind of like go into these kind of like these gray areas that expose you to more risk. And I've often been told that the punishment isn't worth the crime in a lot of these cases, where getting out of that is a lot harder than you might.
I want to take a second and tell you all about Tighten Up Training. As a co-founder, we've spent months and months and months and a lot of money pooling together resources from some of the best moving companies in the world. And we're excited to bring this to an online platform available to any mover to use at an affordable price. Tighten Up Training has over 200 videos, including mover training, your highest turnover position, so that you can reduce claims, streamline operations, give your team the tools to perform at the highest level of service that generate repeat and referral business and allow you to charge higher prices, as well as sales training, marketing training, business development, leadership. We're adding more content as we speak. We've got legal training in there. We've even got door-to-door training for the moving industry, thanks to Lenny Gray at the Moving Titan Retreat. We've seen a massive explosion of moving companies jumping on to Tighten Up Training since the last retreat, and people are loving it. And when you sign up and mention this podcast, we're going to give you a free 6-week onboarding course in order to learn how to hold your team accountable and get the entire team on the platform so that you can have the best off-season and summer season that you've ever had. Ideally, the best 2025 that you've ever had. So go to tightenuptraining.com, schedule your free demo today, and look forward to tightening up. Sorry, Bryan. I had you on mute. Yeah. I heard an echo there.
No, it's okay. I love this because, you literally got the guy from Google. And that's why we've worked with Brad for a while. We hit it off right away because we have the same mindset. And sort of what we've told, because we deal with movers, right? So we have a really specific home services, but the same things apply. And I would always tell people, if you had to explain your strategy to someone at Google, would you be afraid to? Right? So we hear a lot of things like, just do what the big boys do, open up a bunch of locations. And what you're getting confirmation is at some point that is going to fall down flat on your face. Now, we know as movers, there's some things we can do, like we can open up a sales office, a claims office. So we have ways that we can kind of, I would call it like it's still white hat, but we're not going to get flagged or have a problem where we're going to get shut down. But the idea that, and Google's not stupid. Think about the algorithms, right? They have AI. If you're a mover in Phoenix and all of a sudden you've got 6 locations, does that look spammy? I mean, how strong of an algorithm do you need to, Google can see every mover across the US and everyone's got 1 or 2 and this guy's got 6. But that having been said, Brad and I even spoke about that. If you get flagged because it's a trust issue. Now remember, we're an agency. There's other agencies out there, and we're solid gold, like with what we do. But if you're an agency and you get a bunch of clients that get flagged, Brad will tell you that what can happen is they can take down the whole agency because they're just trying to make things easier to manage, right? So everything is associated. So there's that. So you just always want to think about the strategy with Google, with Google, allow it. And then, I think we'll get in a minute of some of the things that connect, and Brad's an expert on this. If obviously we love local search, we've optimized all our clients do really great in the map packs, but imagine only relying on that. And then you get caught and Google's getting better at it and you get taken down. If that's all you're relying on, like, you're a smart marketer. You don't just rely on online search. People do postcards, you do outreach, right? But because this is such an important thing, you don't want to risk a strategy that Google's actively telling you they're looking to take down. We wouldn't do it. And we suggest people listening don't do it and try not to associate with an agency where if that's what they're doing, once again, if the judges were sitting there and you had to sit there and go, here's my strategy. And Google would say, that's not what we're looking for. So from the mover standpoint, I just wanted to add that context.
Yeah, no, those are great points. I have a couple questions. So what about companies that may have gotten verified at a home address, 5-6 years ago, and they're still showing up? Are they at risk of penalizing the entire site or a legitimate location where trucks are parked, or since they're kind of already in there, is there a ton of risk once you do get verified?
There is. So because the way that Google manages this is through an algorithm, right? Like, and just to give you context, part of my responsibility was running the support organization, and we processed over 3 million contacts a year, right? And so, the scale of the operation is just insane. We're managing over 100 million businesses globally. And so when you think about Google operating at that scale, you can understand that there's not a human behind the scenes doing a look at each of these listings, right? It's a systemic approach that we're looking at an algorithm that has lots of different criteria. And what's interesting is that criteria is constantly changing because it's evolving. And as we learn and as we see people that are figuring out ways to get around the policies and things that we've put in place, the engineering team kind of take that as a personal challenge to kind of dial it up. And, there was actually a funny story with one of the engineers where, we knew that years ago you were able to pay companies for listings, right? It's like, I want 6 listings in this locations. I'm going to pay you to create these listings for us. And the internal joke from the engineer was that, before I started working on this project, it was $20 a listing. And then when I finished working on this product, it was $100 a listing. So I'm like, so I must be doing a good job because the price is going up, right? It's becoming harder and harder to create fake listings. But that's an example of where, coming back to your question, is that if you're in there because you were able to get away with something in the past, then the algorithms, going to be monitoring that. So whenever you make a change to the system, like if you change anything to do with the profile, it'll run it through that algorithmic check, and you may find yourself getting suspended for past sins. If you think about it that way. So
and would that suspend the true location as well?
So if it's listed as a hybrid business, which is it has a pin on the map, so it's actually in the example you gave, it was like a home address. When you Google it, there's a pin, and then there's a service area as well. Right now, that is all connected to the one listing. So if that gets suspended, the entire thing is gone. Right? It'll take the whole thing off the map until you then verify or unsuspend or appeal the suspension, where you then have to provide proof and evidence that the business is real. Again, existence and affiliation, right? And at this point, you're going to have a hard time proving existence because it's a house. And so, unless you expect to have customers walk up to your front door and knock on your door, that's not going to fly, right? And so that's kind of where you get yourself into problems. And what most people do in that scenario is they take off the address from the listing and just go purely as a service area business, which then is in alignment with Google's policies, and you're good to go at that point, right? But yeah, it's only a matter of time before you run into problems because the algorithm kind of catches up.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh.
So is there like a geographical distance? Like, I'm in Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay is, it could take an hour and a half to get from one side to the other. Mm-hmm. And, it might make sense for a moving company to have 2 or 3 locations here that they dispatch trucks out of. But the other piece of it too is I know companies that will park their trucks in a lot, then they'll have their office in another area because their office doesn't have the parking. And then maybe they need some storage, and then they put a warehouse over here in this industrial area. And they all happen to be in different corners of the metropolitan area. It's they're all legitimate locations. They're just serving different purposes. Mm-hmm. So is there a case to be had where you could justify that you have, a sales office, a dispatch office, and a storage warehouse that are all legitimate operating locations and just serving different functions? Is that feasible? And is there like a kind of a sweet spot distance to separate out these multiple locations?
Yeah, great question. And yes is the short answer, but let me elaborate. So the radius that Google likes to look at, like kind of like the litmus test to stay within policy, is you need to be within a 2-hour driving distance. Right. And so like if I'm currently in the state of California, right? So if I start saying, I also support San Francisco, I'm in Orange County in South LA, then like that's too far away. That's a 6-hour drive. It's not really realistic. So what they would recommend you do in that scenario is open up multiple service area locations. And you would need to prove that, because the hypothesis is that the crew that you have working in this location is a different crew than you have working that's in the location that's 2 hours away. And that's the general hypothesis that they're working under. So if you can show that you've got a presence in that location, whether it be a storage yard, a sales office, whatever it may be, then that is a legitimate use. That's not faking the system. That's using the system the way that it was designed. And what you'll do there is you'll create 2 listings. You can have them both be service area businesses. The important thing that you do is make sure they don't overlap, right? Because that is then when they conflict with each other, and that actually could be used as spammy behavior, and that could be a risk for suspension. But as long as the service areas don't overlap, you can have 2 different locations, and you can optimize them both for each location, and you'll be right as rain on that scenario.
Most of you have heard me talk about Moversville and the power of their email marketing service that has helped us increase leads by over 112% over the last year. But have you heard of Moversville Connect? Moversville Connect is an incredible resource for all things moving. They feature an array of vendors and services and lists like insurance providers, softwares, equipment suppliers, marketing sources, and much, much more. The best part? This resource is free. Go check out Moversville Connect today by going to moversville.com and clicking Connect. That's moversville.com and click Connect and discover the world of Moversville beyond email.
So Wade, if I could add to that, and Brad, that was beautifully said. This is exactly the strategy we follow with our clients. We don't just say, just follow what these guys say or do what the big boys do or whatever. No, we hear all these different things from people in our market and outside. And we have this, one of the other reasons Brad and I get along so well, and I'm not afraid to talk to him because he knows what our strategy is, right? And he helps confirm that. And there are ways, because we're dealing with movers, right? And I was a mover. So like you said, you asked a great question. It's not really so much gaming the system, but if you knew there's a different part of the Bay that we wanted to try and get a listing to get coverage, and we, as you know, we have a whole team on local that just works on this. We do exactly what Brad says. We'll do the analysis. We'll make sure we don't cannibalize. We'll keep out of the black hat stuff. And there's nothing, Google doesn't say you can't have a yard where you park trucks, and maybe customers come to that. That's legit, like he said. So you just have to be really careful and keep that trust factor up. And if it's okay, I'm going to add a little bit more. I'm going to throw some data out for Brad. Brad, I had this slide at the Moving Titan, but this is really, we're talking about local search, which for a lot of us, Wade, we're thinking the map, right? The map hack, which we all know it's a really important leg in the SEO that we do, right? Your removers, right? Even different than plumbers, right? So you could have someone who's an hour away and hire you for a long distance move, et cetera. So it's a little different, right, Brad? Because we're home service, but movers can do things that plumbers and guys that fix blacksmiths and stuff wouldn't do. So one of the things that I wanted to just bring up is the other way to amplify your local is to remember that every single search someone does results in a search results page. Only 29% of search results pages have a map pack in it. Okay? Not every, I know this for a fact, Brad, I'm going off a little bit, but then maybe you can help the audience with this. I'm looking at, for example, inside Google Search Console for someone's listing, so I can see what the queries are that come, right? Because it's got a UTM parameter. And for example, Wade's listing comes up for 374 different queries. It's not just Tampa movers. And a lot of times movers forget that there's a lot of ways people search where the map pack comes up. But my point is that every query someone types, even if it's local, gives you a search result. 29% of those pages only have a map pack, and only 40% of the people click on the map hack. Some click on the ads, some click on the search results, right? And so what we've done to help our clients dominate is, obviously we want to strengthen the listings, but we have, for all of the areas they service, we have area served pages. So for example, you can show up for every area that's in a metro by having well-written SEO optimized custom area served pages, because Google knows, right? They can connect it. Either from my IP, I type and it can see where I am and I get that page, or I type city or place service. So that's another way you can really amplify your local search. And then the last thing I wanted to add is that, and maybe you can talk about this, Brad, because you were in the ecosphere, is we both believe, and the data shows, that if the listing, some of the strength, prominence, because there's three things, right? The prominence can come from the stronger the website is a ranking factor to the listing, and vice versa. And so sometimes we hear out there, forget SEO, SEO's dead, you don't need articles, etc. So anyway, that's a lot to unpack. But I just wanted to throw some data out, because we have people listening that this applies to. So maybe you could comment on what I just said.
Yeah. I think you answered what my next question was going to be, but maybe elaborate a little bit. So a lot of movers are pigeonholed they're limited by where they can set up a location due to parking and warehouses. And so they might, we saw this in San Antonio. He set up in a San Antonio proper address, but it was not in a great part of town. And we were having a lot of trouble ranking on the maps and in general. And as soon as we moved to a suburb, he starts ranking. And that was like, he did truly move offices, but it was more of a residential area. It was closer to where he lived. Better caliber employees were coming from there. So, I mean, it sounds like there's a way, once the site's strong enough, that you could be in that part of town that you don't necessarily have customers geographically around and still rank in those other areas. But it's definitely a factor to have the geography to be closer to your customer base. Am I correct in hearing that?
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because now we're getting into ranking factors. And so I spent a decent amount of time talking about what not to do, but now I'm going to talk about what you should do, right? When people find out that I worked at Google for over a decade and that I ran the Google Business Profile product, they're like, all right, how do I get to be number one in the map pack, right? It's the inevitable first question that I always get.
Work with us.
I'm pretty sure you asked me that yourself, Bryan. I'll be honest. But what I always tell them is, obviously there's 100 different factors that is all like, because it's an algorithm, and the algorithm has lots of different things that it looks at. But the one thing that has the best ROI, right? Like if you're going to do one thing and nothing else, the one thing that I would advise you to do is to get reviews and have those reviews be written with keywords and locations in mind. So Wade, to your point, where it's like, hey, you may have a particular location and you're really trying to rank in another location. If you have clients in that location, say like, I loved ABC Moving Company's performance. They were very clean. They were very professional. And they really helped me move into this location, right? The city or whatever it is. Then name dropping those locations will add to Google's understanding of relevance for that area. And so, yes, of course, having your listing in that location is also another signal. So that's very helpful. But it's not the only thing that they're looking at, And we were talking too about the balance of the local search, right? Like your Google Business Profile listing and your authority from your website, right? Like, and what type of content are you having on your website? And all of that stuff. What we haven't really talked about yet is that there's a new kid on the block when it comes to search, and that's the AI overview, right? That actually is being put at the very top of search, and it's pushing everything else down the page. And so, when like Brian, I think you said before, you hear this myth like SEO is dead, right? And I think, well, why are people even saying that, right? And they're saying that because the way search is changing, the way that the search industry is evolving, and with the introduction of ChatGPT and Gemini and now Google, like internally, is massively investing in its AI infrastructure and its AI investment. And the way that you see that today in search is via the investment that's going into that AI overview, which is the first thing that you see. And so, coming back to the source of information, if you're doing a local query, then GBP is the main source of data to reference the AI engine when it comes to local information. If you do an informational query, which is becoming more and more popular in the world because things are becoming a lot more conversational, right? Then your website is actually the primary source of information. And so writing content, whether it be pages or blogs or something for your website that answers people's questions, is what is influencing your company's ability to become an authority on that thing. And if you're an authority, then Google will put you in the AI overview as a reference, right? And they'd be like, hey, so a lot of the things that I have been advising a lot of my clients is like, when you're writing content for your website, to write it in the form of a question, right? So like, and a lot of times it's not like, who is the best moving company in Tampa, right? It's usually a little bit more unique than that. So like, what are the, like, even if you produce content that's, what are the best schools in this area or something like that? Like where you kind of like leading, you're creating content that is a precursor to the actual moving event, right? And if you become an authority and you write all this content about things that would actually lead you into the needing a mover, then all of that data kind of like flows upstream and it'll help you become an authority and be, you got more probability that you will show up in that AI overview. And the AI overview is sourcing information from GBP, from your website, from third parties. So like if you happen to get in the press somewhere, so like, I don't know if you do PR in your business, but like local newsletters, newspapers, local news, like any type of stuff that you're doing there, the AI engine is looking at all of that. And it's kind of making a decision on who is an authority in this space. And so they're kind of like some really key tips on how to rank. Like going back to GBP though, reviews is my number one thing. Like, getting reviews is incredibly powerful. It shows two different types of data to Google. It shows that you're active in the community and that it actually gives a user perspective on your services, which is incredibly powerful in the eyes of Google. And then the other thing is it shows engagement. So like that you are actively engaging with your profile. And like engagement was a big internal metric at Google for years and years, where we were using that as a proxy for data accuracy, because like we would believe that if businesses were going in and editing their business profile, even if it's just replying to a review or doing like, then we have higher confidence that the data that is being represented is of higher quality than a business that doesn't touch their listing, like kind of like a set it and forget it type mode. So if you're actively in there and editing your information, there's a signal of engagement that will translate to data accuracy, and Google is more likely to reference information that it believes to be more accurate.
Wow, that's really interesting, and I keep coming up with questions as you guys talk. I feel like we're gonna.
I got something to add to that, if it's okay, because
go ahead.
We love this conversation, and I wish Brad and I got to talk more. But you notice that peppered in what Brad said were words like trust, authority, engagement, right? So a couple of just comments. You couldn't imagine like we optimize our clients' listings with best practices and send signals. But let's say we completely optimized a new location, but you never got a review. No one expects it to get in the map pack, right? These are things that they make common sense, but when you hear Brad talk about it, I love it because it's confirming the strategy that we use to help our clients dominate. The other thing that I just wanted to add is the mix over, Brad, to the website. And so I just happen to have Wade, and he's always nice. He lets us use his data in when we present and stuff. The other parts of the authority and the trust, and I appreciate that you're bringing the website back with the listing because they work together and Google sees it all, right? But that's why, for example, we write articles that get to the first page that are in what we call it the moving funnel. So for a plumber, they don't really have much of a funnel. My plumbing's broken. I look for a plumber. Well, Wade knows for a fact in moving, it's different. Like if he was at a meeting and someone said, I'm thinking of moving to Tampa Bay, he would go up and give his card, go, I'm a mover. Let me help you. So our whole strategy with movers is we capture people early on. The content captures that. A lot of those people actually convert. But the other thing it does is it sends signals to Google. You could correct me if I'm wrong. They're engaging with the site. This site is an authority. So we build the topical authority, which is a whole nother podcast we might do with Wade. And by doing that, now you can see if anyone throws Wade's website in SEMrush, he shows up in AI overview a lot. People also ask, which is still AI, right? So there's all these SERP features. And I'm basically just saying I loved what you said because it all comes back to you have a website that has all the answers. That's what an authority is. And that sends signals back and forth with the listing, correct? Unless you tell me that I'm wrong. And that's a strategy.
You're exactly right. I think search is changing. And, I think Google is leading that change, right? Like you can see it with the introduction of the AI overview and the additional prominence that it's getting at the top of search. But also the way that marketers work is also changing because search is changing, right? And so, is SEO dead? No, but it's changing. You can't get away with the old methods won't get you as much ROI as what. So you really need to start thinking about dropping a bunch of keywords on a page doesn't really do it anymore. I think that if you happen to track SEO and you're in the industry, you'll notice that Google did a couple of algorithm updates last year. Mm-hmm. In the update that they did in March of last year, they did a whole press release on it, and they basically said that we are going to be eliminating unhelpful and unuseful content, right?
It's the helpful content update.
Yeah, and so basically what that means, if I decode that for you, is that there is a whole bunch of content that's being thrown on websites these days that are being generated by AI bots, right? So like ChatGPT, Gemini, all these things, you can just ask it to write me an article on this thing and drop it into. Now, in March of last year, Well, and let me explain the evolution of the size of the internet and how it's growing as well. Because between Q1 of 2023 and Q1 of 2024, the size of the internet grew 2,800%. Right, like it just is massive, and it was all created through a lot of this AI generated content, right? Because it's now incredibly easy to create content. The problem with that is that all the content is the same because it's being generated from the same source. And so if everyone goes to ChatGPT and says, write me an article on this topic, it's all going to sound the same because it's all ChatGPT. And so what Google did in response to that is they're like, hey, now search, I'm not producing anything helpful because all this shit is just the same. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on this, but you can beep it out.
I encourage it.
So
you're not cussing enough.
So it's not enough to just generate content from ChatGPT and throw it on your website, because Google is now smart enough to know that it's AI generated content and it ignores it, right? So like you have to be very smart, and this is where like search is changing, and it's not just dropping keywords in there. You have to write content that is useful and original. And so and now there are ways actually to use AI to write original content, but you have to invest in it. You have to make sure that you tell AI what your brand is, what your perspective is, what your opinions are on a particular topic, so that it creates something that's more unique than the next guy, right? And that is the trick for using AI tools to be relevant in search, right? And not just be another one of those pages that Google is going to pass over because it sees 1,000 articles that say the same thing.
I got a question for you, Brad, if it's okay, Wade, because this, Wade, step to the side. We want to talk. No, I'm kidding. But it's just so great. You imagine being able to have on an advisor like Brad to confirm or help us adjust what we do. But this is the exact reason now when generative search came out, we got a lot of questions. Are you guys just going to replace, why can't we just do it with ChatGPT? And we're like, well, you can use ChatGPT to write content, but if you want it to rank on the search engine, forget it. And we actually described it because when we read the patents behind it, not only was Google looking to smack it down, because the most expensive thing Google does is indexing. It costs a fortune, right? So how much do you get charged when you search? Nothing, right? So the way we interpreted it, not only was it going to get passed over, but they keep a trust factor. And if your site is filled with AI, and we had examples of it, you go down to 0 keywords, which is why, sadly, but we have an entire team of writers that are experts in moving, and that's all they write about. And as a result, we didn't lose. None of our clients lost. As a matter of fact, most of them gained, even though there's a lot more content coming up from behind. And so I'm glad to hear you say that. So it's simple concept, but it's not easy to do because Google's, and I always give this example. I don't know if you've ever heard this one, but I would say, imagine you're an algorithm for a second and Google's trying to figure out what's on this page because it's machine read, right? It's an algorithm's reading it. A lot of in the old days, or even still today, you would just see keywords over and over. But I say just even common sense. If you overheard someone saying the following things, could you figure out what sport I'm talking about? Racetrack. Betting, jockey. What sport am I talking about? Right. and if you think about it that way, like I didn't have to put the keyword in. Google's smart
like
enough.
Game 20 questions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just, if you think about it, instead of all the gobbledygook a lot of people say, and you come from that, Google's smart enough. Google would know with those words what you were talking about.
Yes.
And so there's ways that people that are authoritative or experts speak about things, and the algorithms pick that up. Correct me if I'm wrong. So going back to your point, which I love, I wish we could get away from having an expensive team of writers that are experts in moving that consistently rank and just throw it in ChatGPT. But to your point, we would just be regurgitating the same crap, and it's all, we're not doing anything original.
That's right. You can't replace human insight and creative thinking. AI is great for kind of like efficiency gains and whatnot, but
Like a job post ad or something.
yeah, right. And so yeah, it's going to be a balance, and so for anyone that says SEO is dead, like I couldn't disagree with them stronger, but I do like to pivot their message where it's like the old way of doing SEO is dying. Maybe let's say it that way, because you have to evolve, and search is changing, and you need to change with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like people saying that direct mail is dead. And I know you said that it was a nightmare working for a tech company with Google, but movers still get a ton of business with direct mail. I mean, there's always going to be a market, but I mean, with something like this, it evolves. And I think that's really important to recognize. I've got a couple questions here. So earlier you mentioned that, what was it, 29% of searches show up in the maps, and then only 40% of people click on the map pack. I kind of would like to get a little bit more of a breakdown on what else they're clicking on when you look at PPC, Google guaranteed, organic search, if there's anything else. Do you have a breakdown of like what areas, what percentages of each of those pieces of quote unquote real estate on Google people are clicking on?
So since I threw this out, Brad, I'll talk for a minute and then you can adjust. And these stats came from, Ahrefs, Bright Local, Rank Ranger. There are people that know a lot more than me that have huge data sets. But essentially when you drill down, what they said, was that if you take all the queries that people can search, only about 29% of the queries will produce a map pack.
Right.
And not every even local query does. And I showed examples of that at the Moving Titan. And then if just generally speaking, the breakdown on the page, if there's ads at the top, and then there's, sometimes there's search results, then a map pack, search results and ads. And some of those could be LSA. If there's a map pack, 4 out of 10 will click inside the map pack. The other 60% will have a mix. Some will click on the ads, some click on the search results. That's the data I got, Brad, from those sources. I don't know if it's right or not.
They sound low to me, but you may be looking at a particular industry, whereas the data that I am looking at is like Google wide. And I'll throw another data point at you as well, right? Because the last metric that I saw was that 60% of searches resulted in no clicks, right? Like, and that number is increasing. So if you think of maybe why is that increasing? It's this, and I don't mean to be on the AI bandwagon, but like Google is moving now from a company that provides links to resources into a company that provides answers, right? That's what the AI overview is. And so it's an interesting thing for someone who worked at Google for over a decade. The mission statement of Google, and everyone at Google knows this, is to organize the world's information and to make it universally accessible and useful, right? So it sounds a little bit like a cult when I say that, but like everyone at Google knows what that mission statement is. But if you think about it, they no longer do that. They no longer organize the world's information and make it accessible. They're now actually providing answers. They're moving from a link company to an answer company. And that's what the AI overview does. It uses AI to actually pull this information. So it's just an interesting statistic because people are going to Google, they're doing a search, and now they're not clicking on anything because they're getting the answer that they need. And so like that's an interesting dynamic for marketers, because if they're not clicking on anything, does that mean that they're not directing people to companies? And no, the answer is not. Actually, that's not the case. What's happening is that the leads that are coming through may be dropping in volume, but they're increasing in quality, right? So you might get more conversions out of that, even though the overall lead base is dropping down. So, I've had a lot of companies come to me and show me data and say like, hey, look at all this traffic that has dropped over the last 12 months. And typically what I look at, I say, oh, look, that happened in March. That was the Google's algorithm change number 1. That happened in September when they changed it again, in December. So like a lot of this isn't to do with anything you're doing. It's something that Google is doing. And it's also the way that the trends are moving. So it's we're going to find a new baseline at some point, right? Because the what got you here won't get you there, kind of thing. You know?
I'll give you a little trick, and that we've done to take advantage of that is one of the things you want to do is in the meta description a lot of times, especially for the services, we put our client's phone number. So what you see a lot of times, Brad, is that we can, even for services, we can get a featured snippet, right? Mm-hmm. A featured snippet, or in the AI overview. And it's just a little trick I'm going to give away, that it's not an ad, but Google will show the metadata. And so maybe to your point, like I don't click on it, but I've got the phone number right there, and I pick up the phone. Now we track that with CallRail. You wouldn't know that. So we get to see, it's called a meta number. So we'll put it in the meta description, and Google will once again take it. And to me, featured snippet is still using AI because they're featuring a part of it that they've decided was the best answer. That's a little trick you can do sometimes is I'll just give it away. Put your phone number in your metadata, because Google a lot of times will show it for free.
No, that's really interesting. And, do you happen to know what % of people click on ads versus organic searches? And if you don't, that's okay. We can revisit that. But it's just something that kind of popped into my head. What about like people that click on organic versus map? Like the listings below the map. Do you know what % breakdown that looks like?
Yeah, well, so generally speaking, I do. I know that, and it comes down to pixel depth, essentially, right? So like, how far does someone have to scroll down the page to find something that they want to click on? And I think that the last statistic that I saw was that the drop off on click through rate compared to something that is like in the in the top 3, like in the map pack. If it's in the top 3, right, the click-through rate of those versus, either clicking on more businesses or even scrolling down to organic search results dropped 70%. So like it was a significant drop-off. And so that's where the real estate that is showing up on the screen plays a tremendous, it's hugely important. So that was the last metric that I saw, but depending on, there's a couple of factors that we could look at to adjust that. But that was the overall numbers that I was looking at.
And if you want, Wade, there's an article on Ahrefs, Ahrefs. They break down the stats that Brad was talking about, and that's where I got. They're pretty good. I mean,
I would just be curious.
It depends on the search, but also the map pack doesn't always show up at the top. It doesn't always show up at the top. Right. Sometimes it shows up at the bottom. Sometimes it doesn't show up. But once again, they did a really complete study, Brad, and and they said is that based on your average, right? If there's a map pack on a page, 4 out of 10 will click into the map pack. The other 6 are clicking somewhere else, depending on what's on there. And once again, the map pack doesn't always have to be at the top. Sometimes it's in the middle. Sometimes it's at the bottom. And not every search query has a map pack.
Want to know what the silver bullet for growing your business is? USA Home Listings. USA Home Listings has a myriad of marketing services that are essential to every single moving company. It blows my mind when I have conversations with people who reach out looking for help, trying to get leads, trying to get the phone to ring, that aren't doing mailers and aren't subscribed to USA Home Listings. The data there is so invaluable, and it's not just home listing data, even though that's an awesome, super easy, super intuitive feature that they provide where you can filter out all of the homes that recently went under contract or got listed in your neighborhood, and a new coming soon feature before it even hits the MLS that you can filter out through zip codes, towns, cities, counties, prices. But that's just one small feature that they do. They also have turnkey mailing services. They'll help you design your postcard, a postcard that actually gets results. If you've tried mailers in the past and it didn't work, it's probably because you didn't have the right elements on your postcard. And they also have a social media division. So check out usahomelistings.com. It's an essential addition to all of your marketing needs. Before you do any other marketing, check out usahomelistings.com. No, that makes sense. And I know Google, like their whole purpose is to make money. They're a for-profit company. And
They need to make money somehow.
yeah. So that's kind of what I was wondering is like, of course the SEO is a fantastic investment for people that are considering doing SEO. But how much stock should they put into the ads as well, as part of a well-rounded campaign? And that's something that we could talk with an ads expert on at some point. But that was what I was kind of wondering. My next question, it goes back to the AI. Is there a way? So I was talking to Bryan the other day about this. I was looking for new shoes. And I asked ChatGPT to compare these different shoes that I was thinking about buying. And it gave me a lot of good answers. It gave me, the heel drop. It gave me cushioning, like all these different things. And so I was like, I wonder if people are going to start asking ChatGPT what the best moving company in Tampa is. And so I threw that in there. And, I would get different results every time. But what I did is I was like, what about Two College Brothers? And they said, Two College Brothers is a great company, blah, 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 blah. I was like, and then I told ChatGPT, I own Two College Brothers. Can you make this show up higher? And it said, yes, I'll update my memory. And anytime this term is searched in my system, we will show you it higher. And then I asked somebody else to do it. And, I'm wondering, though, is there like a way to train that ChatGPT or Google Gemini or the Elon Grok 3, like all these different things that are coming up? Are there ways to kind of talk to him and be like, yo, give me a little bit of an edge next time somebody searches, ChatGPT looking for this stuff and like AI search? And you mentioned a little bit more earlier about the content playing a huge role in it, but are there other ways to kind of game that almost?
So all of those programs are large language models, and so they're all built. They're not real time, right? They have to be constructed, and the model has to be created, and it has to be trained on a whole bunch of data. And so you asking it for a favor isn't going to work, I'm sorry to say, right? Like it's like asking it to rank. That's not how it works. But I will say this though, right? They're not all playing with the same rules. And what I mean by that is the Google Business Profile data, right, is Google's database, right? And so Google has a tremendous advantage when it comes to local context, right? Because ChatGPT is sourcing all of its local data from Bing, right? And so no one really uses Bing. And so like if you aren't investing in making sure that your business information is up to date on Bing, then you're not feeding ChatGPT. So so a lot of my clients, and I know I'm a Google guy, right? But like a lot of my clients, I'm like when it comes to citations and it comes to like, you need to get into all of these directories. I think I think that's a myth. I don't think you have to be in all the directories. I think you have to be in a couple. And the rest is just crap, right? And so like you need to be in Bing, not because I care about Bing, but because I care about ChatGPT. You have to be in Apple, right? Apple Business Connect. And you have to be in a couple of these, like obviously Google, because that's what's feeding Gemini. But if you ask Gemini questions with local context, like if you were to do that same experiment, Wade, but on Gemini, not on ChatGPT, my guess is you're going to get more rich data because it's leaning into the GBP data infrastructure. Because Bing is so far behind Google in terms of its local content, ChatGPT is at a disadvantage. They're playing with one arm tied behind their back. Now that might improve in the future, but it's not a fair game at the moment. And this is where, depending on the type of query that you're using, is where you may choose to use a Gemini engine or a Gemini large language model over the ChatGPT large language model. Now, if it's informational in context, I think ChatGPT is amazing. It's great for information, but like if you're trying to inject local context and ask about businesses and stuff like that, Google's definitely got the advantage.
No, that's really interesting to hear. Yeah, because in my people my age, like you just hear AI, you think ChatGPT. We actually just wrapped a truck. Actually, it's getting wrapped tomorrow, but it's going to say because ChatGPT can't move your boxes on the side.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
Sorry, I didn't
But-
say because Google Gemini, but we just know that ChatGPT is like what people have heard of, I guess.
I was going to say, Brad, since we really don't know, I'm the oldest one here, but since we see things change, so it's like I'm coming from like, how do we protect our clients? What do we do so that we can make them strong now and in the long run? And so we are strategic in that. To your point, I mean, you know, our success on local and Google, but every client has their listing in Bing, right? Because that's where some of this data comes from. And so we optimize that and get them into the main one. So I like hearing that because it's just like backlinks. They're not all equal, right?
Right.
And one really great one is worth 10,000 crappy ones. And it's the same thing with citation. So it's moved towards those really specific ones, including getting them to Apple Business Connect. And then, cause we don't know 5 years from now, which of the engines, there could be a whole new one that comes in. Obviously we're gonna think whatever Google does, we're investing in and making sure we get in it, right? Because let's face it, it's Google. And so I think that's one of the things that we try and do is like, where's it going to go? But the other thing I'll just mention too, and wait, I think we had this conversation a couple years ago when the devices, and if I say it, it's going to listen to me. And people were worried that's going to take over search. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Did it? No. So once again, I think Brad and we know that these will be part of it. So not being afraid of it, being smart. How do we get into it and get that data in there? And it all still comes back to authority, trust, expertise, and experience across these. Once again, that's my opinion. You can agree or disagree, but that allows us to leverage what's going on right now, but think about the future. And we don't know what the main AI engine is going to be. There could be a whole new one coming out of a different country.
Sure.
But we're never going to discount Google.
Do you have a little bit longer? I've got plenty more questions. I can keep going. I don't know how much time you guys have.
No, I love this.
Do you have a hard stop at all? Just so, because I want to get the most. I mean, this is an awesome conversation. I'm really learning.
Yeah, I do have a hard stop, unfortunately, but we can keep going for a few more minutes if that's okay. And then maybe we can do another one, right? So.
Yeah, so I'll try to get the most bang for the buck, and then we'll do a whole other one, another podcast because I want to keep this going. So when we're talking about reviews and how that plays into the, one of the best things like an owner can do without having to go spend a bunch of money with an agency and writing a ton of content, doing all that stuff. You had mentioned some interesting things earlier about the keywords, about the location, and I'm curious, we know as movers, we all hate Yelp, and Yelp, it filters out reviews. I'm curious why, because I can see why Yelp does that, like what their intention with it is. It's not accurate at all. It sucks. We all hate it. But I'm curious why Google doesn't really, I feel like at least they're not super strict on filtering out reviews and what people can do with their reviews, going a little deeper to help with their SEO, if pictures help with that, or if there's any other information that they can include, if the IP address of the person leaving the review plays into it at all, so you don't have people in India, writing hundreds of reviews, fake reviews. I guess I'd love to just wrap it up with a little bit more on what the average owner who doesn't want to spend money, what can they do themselves when it comes to reviews or anything else, and kind of those differences that I just mentioned and what they, what goes on there.
It's crazy that your last question is about reviews, because I could talk for an hour just on reviews.
Maybe we do a whole episode on reviews then.
So let me try. Well, let me tee that up. There, right? It's let me try and tee up a broader conversation on that, because there's a lot of different directions we can take this. We could talk about fake reviews and the pros and cons of fake reviews, and what is Google explicitly doing to weed out fake reviews, and the challenge that Google has is that with everything related to Google, it's an algorithm, and that algorithm produces it's not a binary, it's a percentage. So it's like, what probability do we believe that this is fake? What probability do we believe that this is real? And they are looking at IP address. They are looking at all these other data that Google has access to that isn't publicly available in order to determine whether they feel like it's real or fake. And if it meets a certain threshold, then they pull it down. And if it doesn't meet a certain threshold, they leave it up. And what they're doing behind the scenes is they've got their hand on that dial and they're dialing it up and back, right? And so like what's interesting is that from the guy that ran the support organization, I was hit both ways with this topic. I was hit from the like, there is too much crap on the map. There's so many fake listings. Like, you know, I'm getting bombarded with negative fake reviews, and then my competitors have got all these positive fake reviews, and it's killing our business. And so then the engineering team will go in and they'll dial it up. And then next thing you know, all the 5-star reviews get pulled down, and it's like, oh my God, you just pulled down all of my legitimate the reviews that I spent all my time trying to build. And so that's the collateral damage. And so like the art of the engineer there is to try and figure out where is that healthy medium. And, you know, their goal and the bane of my existence in talking to the trust and safety organization about this is that I always used to go and advocate how there's too much fake stuff that's getting through the gates. And they would come back to me and they would say that when they do an analysis of that, they say that we're keeping fake reviews or spammy behavior to less than 10%, right? And so they're like, we're good with that, right? Like we're keeping 90% of the crap out of there, but 10% is going through. Now, my counter argument to that was, well, if you're getting 100 million reviews a month, like 10% of that is still 10 million reviews that is getting through. Like the order of magnitude is just massive. And so there's a lot that is happening behind the scenes to try and deal with this problem. My advice is, you know, to kind of come back to your question is, you know, legitimate reviews is the way to go. So like make sure that you're capitalizing on every client that you have. I've seen some companies incentivize their agents. You can't incentivize the user. That's against policy. But you can incentivize your staff to solicit reviews from your customers. And if you can get them to inject keywords into the review itself, that's going to help from a boost perspective. So I think that's my teaser, I guess, for maybe a longer conversation on that. But we could talk for an hour on reviews alone.
If I could really quick, can I add a piece to that, because we're movers that are listening? This is what we counsel our clients to add on to that. If you can get photos in there, yes, and those photos show something related to moving. The reason I mention this, Brad, is that Google's image API reads the image. They can see trucks, guys, boxes, and I can show you sometime, Wade, the actual API, and it tells you what's on it. So
it also looks at the location as well. The location.
It is the location. So right. We always counsel, like, and just the same thing. A review that has these elements could sometimes trust-wise be worth 5 reviews that don't, but get images in there that have something to do with the move, right? Mm-hmm. Guys with the crew, with the actual person, with the name of the truck behind them, because Google can actually pull out the text. So images that have something to do with the move, the API will see those as trustworthy. The other is mentioning guys' names. We've seen really good success in the strength of the listing going up, because if Google sees certain guy, if you're naming the guy that was on the move, right? Just think about it, right? And that's common with movers.
Word of warning on that one. Only use their first name. Don't use their last name. Last name is a violation of PII data, so you don't do that. Just
that's usually not a problem, but thanks for that. And then the other thing is, once again, the keywords that people use to describe, like if you go into our clients and you look and you see what words are used, if it's a good move, and movers know because they want that tip, so they'll be, or their incentive, right? So what ends up happening, Wade, when I ran my moving company, is we would incentivize the guys to get, a review, but also that's the same time when they're signing off, like, were you happy with your move? I was happy. Great. Would you mind doing a review? That's the perfect time to ask them, but getting their name, and then they will naturally almost put in words like professional, experience. You would be surprised, but you can give them some of those words, right? Yeah. I moved from here to here, right? These are things that, if you think about it, they're common sense. And I think we might end up with a cheat sheet, and we can give that to you. But we've seen those reviews really boost. And then it's also when a user is reading them and seeing that's also a good click-through rate. So that's the mover part I would add to it.
Love it. Love it. No, that's really, really good stuff. I'm going to definitely isolate that, make it a little real, because that's definitely want to share with my team too.
You guys do a really good job, Wade.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Almost all our clients do, but that's how we would count.
Well, you guys do an even better job because we couldn't do it without you all. So I really appreciate you, Bryan. Brad, great talking with you. I'm serious. I want to get some more of these podcasts out, even if we did like a mover search marketing Monday or something for 20 minutes. I mean, I got so many more things I want to talk about, but I know you got to run. Thank you both. Thank you for tuning in to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. I'm your host, Wade Sweikel, with Bryan Bloom and Brad Wetherall of Mover Search Marketing, the best in the business, and signing off. Before we wrap up, I want to thank the team at Hey Lou for making this show happen. Hey Lou is a virtual assistant placement and management platform owned by a fellow moving titan, and they provide the production for the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. But here's what's really amazing. Their virtual assistants do way more than just podcast support. From managing my crazy schedule to handling client communications, data and KPI analysis, and even sales support for a fraction of the cost of traditional salaried in-house employees, they're truly a secret weapon behind Two College Brothers growth. Curious how a VA could transform your business? Check out our referral link in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. If you would like to learn more about any of the sponsors listed on this show, want to apply for the next Moving Titan retreat, or interested in owning or working for Two College Brothers franchise, drop me a line at wade@twocollegebrothers.com. Moving out. Have a great day.